Well, welcome to The Other Side Extra. As we said, we're going to be doing a few extra shows over the coming weeks, putting them out on Sunday nights at 7:30 p.m, where we sit back and have a little bit of a casual chat, no frills production, with some smart people about important issues. And at the moment, of course, we're coming up to the Queensland State election on the 26th of October, which is only a few weeks away. We have the ACT election, of course, on the 19th of October. But the Queensland election is our focus for the next few weeks with our new show, The Other Side Extra. The Other Side Extra will drop on Sundays at 7:30, but it won't be every Sunday. It'll just be whenever we like to put out a bit of a chat with some friends. And our friends today have two very esteemed guests with us today to discuss the Queensland election, very senior Queensland politicians and both former members of the Liberal National Party, the LNP, in Queensland, joined by former Queensland Premier from 2012 to 2015, and prior to that, Brisbane Lord Mayor for many years, Campbell Newman. Campbell, thanks for joining us.
G'day, Damian. Thanks for having me.
And also we have Senator Gerard Rennick. Senator Rennick, of course, a Queensland senator, previously with the LNP, but has recently left the party and set up his own party. I might just let each of you guys, before we get into the discussion about the Queensland election and your thoughts on it, just for 1 minute to sort of explain how you came to leave the LNP, what the circumstances were around that, and what you've been doing since. So maybe if you want to kick off on that, Campbell, just for a minute.
Well, I think COVID was the big catalyst, mate. It was seeing a coalition government, but also state divisions of the Liberal Party, leaders, whether they were in office or in opposition, just fold up like wet paper bags while human rights were violated, where the most egregious things were done in the name of protecting the community that ultimately, I believe, has hurt the community today. But more fundamentally, I left back in 2021 because I felt that the Liberal National Party had abandoned their values. They've got a statement of values and principles on their website, as do the Liberal Party. They're not that party anymore, and that's a great tragedy. So I joined the then Liberal Democrats, now the Libertarian Party, and I'm delighted to be working with a group of people who actually believe in things, who believe in small government, balanced budgets, the rights of the individual, and families being able to bring up their kids the way that they believe should happen. So really, perhaps it's a better fit for yours truly.
Okay, and Senator Rennick, your story?
Thanks, Damian. Well, look, I basically left the Liberal Party in the end, and I have to say I agree with everything Campbell said. The party has lost its values and it doesn't stand up for its values. And by the party, we should be more specific, the parliamentary wing. Many members of the LNP are actually very frustrated with the performance of the parliamentary wing, who basically, once they're elected, effectively put a sock in their mouth and cower down and bow down to the media and the vested interests. But the real indeed, I often thought about whether or not I should stay or go, and I made that decision to stay in the party and try and turn it around. But in the end, I left, not because I lost my pre-selection. I actually tried to stay in the party even after that. I left in the end because my pre-selection process was flawed. I took them to court, and after they used cases against me in their the decision of the Disputes Committee, they then went to court and said they're not justiciable. They're an unincorporated body and they're not justiciable. And I think it's an absolute disgrace that the people who make the law in this country think that they are above the law. And I will not stay in a party that not only doesn't uphold its values, but lacks integrity. And if they're not going to actually do the right thing by their own members when they hold pre-selections, then I don't want any part of it.
So, Gerard, you've set up, I think People First is the party that you've set up. What are you planning to do there? And obviously this is federal politics we're talking about in relation to you. So what's the plan?
Well, the plan is basically to get back into the Senate at the next federal election. Unfortunately, the way it works on the Senate is that if you want to get your name above the line, you have to be in a party. I wasn't ready to join any other party, quite frankly. I wanted to run for the last 8 to 10 months on policy. I got into politics because I wanted to introduce good policy into the parliament. Look, I think there needs to be a consolidation of the minor parties. but I don't have any. I don't think that can be done in the next 8 to 10 months. And the effort involved in that would then distract from what I want to talk about, which is focusing on the policy, or should I say, the actual policy vacuum that's going on in Canberra and also at the state level, which we'll get to in a minute. And this morning, for example, I'm releasing my policy on monetary policy, people first, my policies on monetary policy on capital markets. And one of those things you may be interested to know is that I'm going to call on superannuation boards to have to be elected by their members. There is very poor governance. Yep. There is very poor governance in the superannuation sector. And then, of course, I also want to bring back a public bank. And no, it's not because I want to invade your life. I think we should have private banks as well. But I'm concerned about the closure of banks in the regions. And I'm also concerned about the cost of insurance. It's not going to undermine the private banks, but we have to make sure that banking and insurance services, which are essential services, are provided to the people.
All right. Okay. Well, thank you, Gerard. Like a true politician, you took the question and delivered your message. So nice.
I don't agree. I don't agree with everything, by the way, that Gerard just said. But I tell you what, I agreed with about 80% of it, and I've particularly been fascinated that for example, Wayne Swan taking a chairman's role, in terms of one of the top super funds. He might have been a federal treasurer, but he certainly, I don't believe, is the guy who should be managing vast sums of money of members' funds. And well, he shouldn't without their explicit support. So that's a great one, Gerard. I think you're right on the money there.
Yeah, I mean, we've got
no pun intended.
$4 trillion under management in super funds in this country, and $2 trillion is sitting in super funds that are managed by, well, they're either industry super funds or they're public sector funds, which is concerning because we know the industry funds are connected very much to the political left. All right, gentlemen, on the topic though, we're going to look at some general issues relating to the Queensland election. So let's just start the obvious. Everybody is now saying that the LNP are a shoo-in. Campbell, do you think it is now a complete lay-down misere? Is there any hope for Labor at this point?
Look, I think Crisafulli and the LNP are going to win, but at this stage I can't see a dramatic landslide of the scale of 2012 coming to pass. If they've got to get 12 to win, I can sort of rattle off about 9 that I think they'll get, and they would be Gavin, Stafford, which never gets mentioned, but I think can be picked up, Aspley, Keppel, Bundaberg, the 3 seats around Townsville and Barron River. Those would be sort of my initial 9 of the 12. After that, it gets a bit more difficult for me. And I just don't think the small target strategy has offered an alternative vision. And I do note that in recent days, Crisafulli has been taken off message by things like abortion and VAD. And, again, that was always going to happen, that sort of stuff. And I don't think the way they've dealt with that has been particularly effective.
Okay. A 93-seat parliament, the Queensland Parliament, 51 currently ALP, 35 to the LNP. So as you say, Campbell, they need 12 to get that 47 majority. The Katter Australia Party on the crossbenches, Katter Australia Party 4, Greens 2, Independents 1. Gerard, do you think there's any hope for Labor? And and do you think that we could end up with a minority government if the Liberals do get across? Sorry, if the LNP do get across the line, they won't have a majority.
Look, Damian, I don't pretend to be an expert on predicting elections. I think it's probably I think it's more than likely that Crisafulli would win. Is that the ideal situation we want? No, it's not, because we've seen David have been very weak in upholding the party values, in particular when he didn't oppose the treaty last year in Cairns. But what was worse about that was that the convention about 2 or 3 months later is that the members of the party who were very, very upset about the fact that the state side didn't oppose the treaty were effectively shut down by David Crisafulli and Lawrence Springborg on the convention floor. Now, that sort of behaviour is the behaviour of, I don't know, I think a thug's probably a bit too heavy, but it's the behaviour of someone that isn't open to opinions and isn't prepared to fight for the values of the party. And that one's not a negotiable one. Sometimes, politicians let go, or aren't as steadfast with their values because there may be genuine other needs, or there may be a different point of view that has some validity. But there was no validity in any of that. This was the state of Queensland. It has always been very strongly pro. We're all one. I mean, the great example I like to use as our state of origin football team. There's never been any racial division in that. It's just been we're Queenslanders versus the rest, and that's the way it should be. Obviously, proud Australian here, but.
But the Liberal Party do have this identity politics problem. They persistently fail to stand up against identity politics. They consistently follow the Labor Party lead on all of this stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Too scared to speak out, and it's something that both of you have probably had to deal with. But there's so many liberal.
Gerard, I mean, you're right. That 70% almost just slightly off 70% of Queenslanders said no to the voice. And that was always going to be the case. And why Christopher Hawley would do what he did, as you just said in Cairns, it's just beggars belief. I mean, what one side of it says a complete lack of political judgment to not be able to feel the pulse of Queenslanders. I mean, I'm sure it wasn't a surprise to you, Damian, or you, Gerard. I was probably surprised that it got to 70. But if you'd asked me prior to the thing, I'd have said at least 62, 63% in Queensland. And yet they go off and have this sort of harebrained adventure, with the left.
There seems to be a lot of disconnect between what the public want and what the major parties are delivering at the moment. I mean, there's dissatisfaction on both sides. Certainly on our side of politics, there is a dissatisfaction with the Liberal Party and a lot of people who are not going to be necessarily celebrating or excited about an LNP victory finally in one state in Australia coming up if they do win. That's a bit of a sad state of affairs, isn't it, Gerard?
It is a sad state of affairs, and it's not just, and there's two sides to this disappointment, right? You've got your red meat issues, which is COVID, climate change, identity politics, and we are weak on that. But not only that, though, we're weak, and when I say weak, this is the entire political spectrum, are actually weaker on bread and butter issues like taxation issues, monetary policy issues, dealing with our bureaucracy. I mean, the first motion I put into Parliament as an independent senator was to have a federation convention, or get the Legal and Con to investigate holding a federation convention to look at the duplication of roles and responsibilities between the state and federal governments. We don't need two environment departments, education departments, water departments, health departments, so on, so on, so on.
Can't afford it.
And, I'm linking, one of my policies is I'm linking reforming the bureaucracy, getting rid of renewable subsidies and means testing that defined benefit scheme to give a $3,000 tax cut to everyone. Right, lift the tax-free threshold to $40,000, and we need to get back to basics. People are paying way too much income tax in this country.
Absolutely.
But here's the thing. It's crickets out there, even amongst the coalition and Peter Dutton and Angus Taylor, and they will not release a policy. It's a Punch and Judy show down here. It's a circus in the Senate, and I'm pretty sure it's the same in the lower house. They won't release policies until 2 or 3 weeks before the date of the election, by which pre-polls opened. There's very little scrutiny over those policies. The election's won or lost, and then they go back into the Punch and Judy show. And I'm holding a press conference this morning to release my monetary capital markets policy. But one of the things I'm going to point out at the start is I'm not afraid to talk about policy here and now. And we need to have these discussions. And, Campbell, I discussed it with John Ruddick. I'm happy to come back on the show and talk about the concept of free marketeers versus protectionism and my definition of protectionism.
We should do that. Let's do that. Yeah, absolutely.
And by the way, it's not tariffs driven. It's by protecting the individual and the families from the unrestrained power of the institutions, whether it's bureaucrats, super funds, or whatever.
It's one of the biggest issues in Australia today, I think. That won't get talked about is the way that we have all these bureaucracies, various commissions and authorities who are just way ahead of themselves. They're not acting like public servants. They lord it over us. They boss us around. They threaten us. And it doesn't matter where you go. And I think it's a huge issue. I mean, if you're a small business in Australia today, you will find that the actions of, say, Austrac with their anti-money laundering laws will then impact on you and cost you time and resources as you respond to ongoing requirements by a bank to turn up and be ID'd. You might have banked with someone for 40 years, but you'll continue to be pestered every 18 months to turn up to your local branch and show your passport or your driver's license. It is just ridiculous. That's just an example of the
Well, you can't even go and have a drink in a bar without a passport or a driver's license in
exactly.
Brisbane.
You know, we really have got to a crazy level. We've been gaslighted, or the old thing about boiling the frog. That's what's happening. But anyway, I suppose you want to talk about Queensland, don't you? Yeah.
We probably should get back on topic. I do really want to have a discussion about these issues, though. I find it fascinating, and I would love to have you back on to do that. I'm just conscious we've got to let you go at some point. But so just coming back to the question of, you know, a lot of people don't vote on policy. Let's face it. I mean, lots and lots of people tune in at the last minute. They kind of look at how someone looks and what impression they get from them, whether they think they're nice and trustworthy looking, sounding. Stephen Miles, the Premier of Queensland, seems to have been able to distance himself significantly from Anastasia Palaszczuk, I think, much more than I thought he would have been able to. He seems to have done a pretty good job. What do you generally, both of you as campaigners, but I'll start with you, Campbell, what do you think of Miles' overall performance and his sort of general appeal to voters who may not be looking so much at issues?
Well, he's done better than I've expected, and I think he's coming across as someone who's perhaps not going to offend or scare. I think that's particularly important, sadly, in Australia today. I don't think Australians understand what true leadership looks like, by the way. If you go to the debate, that was very instructive. I got a bit of flack from LNP sort of hardcore supporters because I said that I thought that Miles had won it. And the reason I said that is if you go and look at the footage, Miles, and this is a relative thing, Miles had a more comfortable, confident stance. He addressed the audience at home, right? Whereas Christoforli was very intense, and he spent his time looking like this, sort of, you know, addressing his points to the Premier, and it was a bit yip, yip, yip. And, you know, I just sat there with my wife, Lisa, and we sort of looked at that, and we said, well, look, you've got to convince the folks at home, and that's instructive. David comes across as this, you know, very driven guy. Now, I saw that when he was a minister, and he was incredibly effective. He was a good minister. But I just think that in this campaign and in 2024, he might not have the edge when it comes to, you know, being someone that people are warming to. I mean, Miles, I think, is the happenstance Premier. He's I think a lot of people scratch their head and go, God, how did this guy get there? You know? I mean,
there's a bit of a likability factor there.
Yeah, there's a likability element, yeah, and he's been selling that on Instagram intensively, obviously wrenching the young and also using TikTok. So I think that
even when he had his big gap.
To cut to the chase, sorry, I've gone on a bit long, but to cut to the chase,
right.
My sense of it is that polling may show, if there's another poll out, that Miles' stocks have improved slightly. But I wouldn't be surprised if Christoforli's have gone flatline, and he was already more popular, but maybe even declined. So you don't really want that in a campaign. It's a good thing that polling voting starts on Monday the 14th. So it's upon us now.
Yeah, and I mean, even Miles, when he made his terrible gaffe of forgetting the name of a candidate in the electorate, he was actually
that was handled well. Yeah,
he looked kind of adorably human. As my wife said, you know, it's people warm to that. Everyone could relate to those situations where you just have a mental blank or something like that. So even a big gaffe like that played okay under the circumstances where it might not have for somebody less likable. Gerard, your take on the leader's sort of overall performance and general appeal to voters who might not be looking at issues so deeply?
Look, Damian, I haven't been following the state campaign that closely because I'm obviously very consumed in my job. I'm not convinced that Stephen Miles has done a good job of distancing himself from Anna. I think that, and I mean, I'm coming from a partisan point of view here. He was a part of the Anna Palaszczuk government. He's a part of the Labor government. I mean, they were on the nose, in my view, in early 2020. Yep. Palaszczuk did a great job of making it all about COVID, and she was keeping everyone safe. She bluffed a lot of people. But I think now that, the hangover's kicked in, it's kicked in for quite a long time. Personally, I think many people, and I don't know that they're coming with baseball bats, every one of them, but we're in that kind of territory where I think people have just switched off and said, let's give the other side a go.
Yes.
And I look, don't get me wrong, I don't think that they're necessarily in love with the other side. I know many of the members of the LNP are not excited by the fact that Christopher is going to be leading. I mean, normally, even in the 17 election under Tim Nichols, when he didn't win, there was a lot more excitement amongst the members than what there is today. A lot of the members are very disillusioned with the leadership of the party under Lawrence Springborg. Sure, they want to win, they want to get rid of Labor, but they're also, I think they're sort of sitting there with bated breath, hoping, well, let's hope David Christodoulou doesn't turn into the Malcolm Turnbull of Queensland politics, because that's my fear at the moment, is that he will cave into wets like Sam O'Connor and the media, because he hasn't shown an ability to fight for the party's values. He's always caved into the narrative. He's more focused about the narrative, and as an ex-journalist, and I don't think he was a journalist for that long, he's an ex-journalist and an ex-staffer, so his experience really in the real world isn't that extensive. So his knowledge about things across, things that, if you have confidence in your own intelligence, that builds conviction. And because David doesn't have that real world experience where you gain, emotional intelligence and understand the way the world works, he's easily swayed. And he's not the only Robinson Crusoe there. 80 to 90% of politicians are like that, because they've got to the position they're in because they're career yes men. And when they actually, so all they ever do is say yes, yes, yes.
Yeah, well, that's a fundamental
making
flaw.
decisions, they don't know what to do next in terms of sitting down, getting out the laws. If you're a minister, the first thing you should do is say, give me all the legislation relative to my portfolio, and give me the budget of my portfolio, give me the number of staff, the FTEs, give me the job descriptions of every employee, and you go through it line by line, and you say, what are you doing? And, there's two types of jobs. You have a recurring role, or you have a point, you're in a contracting role where you've got a definite outcome. In that case, you put a timeline to them. So that's the sort of things you got to do. You got to go right into the detail. Now, I'm not convinced that David's ever been in a prior role where he's had to go sit down and go into the detail, and he's going to need good people around him. Jared Blay, yet again, is another career politician. Deb Frecklington did have a bit of experience in the real world. JP Langbrook's probably, got some, he was a former dentist, I believe, but he's got some experience. But there's a lot of those ministers don't have a lot of depth of experience. So that's where the bated breath will be. But look, let's give him the benefit of the doubt and see how he goes in the first couple of years.
I think just on something you said earlier, Gerard, if I can just jump in, you said there before that, you thought that Miles wasn't able to distance himself. Well, I'm actually more with where Damian is. I think he has been able to distance himself. But the point is, like, you're dead right. I mean, Miles was absolutely there. He's fully invested in all the terrible, decisions and the incompetence of the Palaszczuk government. But the thing about this campaign, and maybe I've missed it, I don't see the LNP relentlessly telling Queenslanders this, that out of the last 35 years, the Labor Party have been in charge for 30. And at that point alone, if that was being hammered day after day, that would make a difference, but it's not. And so that's how they get away with it. And if there was a mistake in the 2015 election when we lost, it was that we didn't remind people about Anna Bligh and why the community had elected us. And so, I don't see a hard negative edge to the LNP's campaign, and that's just mystifies me. Like, people hate negative campaigns, but guess what? They damn well work.
Well, you need a little bit of it at least.
Yeah, that's a fair point, Campbell. And look, as I said, I'm not that close to the campaign, so I'm not going to disagree with you on that point at all. But you're right there. Look, there may be an apathy that if it doesn't save them, at least narrows the gap back to where it is. The Catters or someone do get the balance of power. But time will tell. I mean, we'll find out in a few weeks, of course. But it is worth remembering. I'll just put this in. The LNP needs to keep the hubris to a minimum, because, as you pointed out, Campbell, this will be the third election victory in 35 years. It's nothing to write home about.
No.
And they're not going to really win this. It's going to be Labor's loss. So, some of these guys, I think I can just see the hubris is going to be there. Then they need to go, well, no, we need to actually put some, runs on the board before we start patting ourselves on the back.
In their heads, they won this some time ago for quite a few of them. That's clearly the case. The thing about election campaigns is how does it play out for the people at home? And I just give you this very quick picture, Damian. It's sort of it's a Thursday night. It's 10 to 6. Dad's just got home and he's over there doing something, fiddling with the barbecue. She might be doing the mashed potato and the veggies over there, and the kids are sort of running around causing havoc. The TV goes on, and it's on, but they're not really watching. But it's just sort of washing over, and it's the vibe. It sounds very the castle.
Yeah.
It's the vibe. It's the Mabo thing. But it is. It's how people come across. And if what I'm getting here from this campaign is not. It's just he said this, she said that, or he said this, he said this. And it's not like, and it's how does that guy look? How does this guy, Christopher Fawley, look? I'm not getting a message that, hey, this is an incompetent, hopeless, government that makes bad decisions. And that's not coming through it's not coming through for me.
I think that's exactly, the context. I wasn't, in no way am I sort of suggesting that Miles doesn't carry all the baggage of Palaszczuk and it hasn't been part of a terrible government. But, yes, it's that overall sort of, impression, as you say, the vibe of the thing. And, amusingly, there was a live radio interview on a Brisbane breakfast radio show the other day, and a lady called in and said, she had a crush on him. And he was all, she said, "Oh, I think he's hot," boldly telling the people that, and he replies, "I'm blushing now, Natalie." That sort of retail politics, the friendly guy thing on a high rating commercial radio station can sadly, in this country, unfortunately, because we do have a fairly disengaged apolitical community, can have an impact, and we have compulsory voting, it can have an impact.
For the record, he does absolutely nothing for me.
Yeah, okay.
Just amongst you fellas here today, just in this private conversation,
Good to know, mate.
He does nothing for me.
Good to hear. All right, so let's get into some of the issues quickly. We are almost out of time, actually, but first of all, just cost of living, which I think we need to touch on. The state budget's blown out $9 billion, which is a heck of a lot, more than 10%, from $70 billion to $80 billion, due to energy rebates blowing out at about $2 billion. That's the $1,000 that they gave everybody off their energy bills. And maybe the 50-cent fares, public service operating expenses generally, including just having more public servants and pay rises for public servants. That's been an extra $2.2 billion. Infrastructure is most of the rest of the money, and that's blown out, and that includes a blowout around transport and main roads of $1.32 billion. We also know that the broader infrastructure program is blown out from 89 to $107 billion. Everything's blown out, and that includes the renewable energy transition budget blowout from 19 to 26 billion. There was a 2023 coal windfall of 10 billion, but that's not there anymore. And we're sitting on state debt of 132 billion, forecast to go to 188 billion by 2027. These numbers are all a bit of a bit high and sort of hard to get a grasp on. But that level of state debt, that's like what the federal debt used to be. I mean, we are, and Victoria's worse, I know, but we're heading very much towards Victoria. Maybe, Gerard, to you first on this one. Cost of living, debt, taxes. I mean, will this, Chris Philly says he's going to cut tax and lower debt. Cameron Dick, the current treasurer, says you can't do both without cutting government. The reality is we've got to cut government, and that was probably what caused your problems, Campbell. But Gerard, firstly, just your thoughts on that?
So the situation you just described there is why I've never wanted to run for state politics, because state governments have very little leverage in how they go around doing things. But there are a couple of easy low-hanging fruit issues there. We need to be very careful, just before I start talking, about the use of the word public servant. We've got to use the word distinguish between public servants and bureaucrats.
Absolutely.
So I just want to use the word bureaucrats here in terms of the back office now. By all means, I think our teachers and our nurses do a great job, and given the rapid population growth, I'm sure that if we make sure they you know turn up to work and do their job, I don't see the need to cut anything there. But where we would be able to cut is in terms of the back end, so the backroom bureaucrats who do the paper shuffling and make the rules and regulations. So in terms of making savings, you could look at savings there. You can obviously cut all subsidies for renewables. That would be in the billions. But the other thing is the only way that state government, well, apart from efficient cost management, the other thing that you need to look at, the only way state governments can get out of this mess, and it's been done before by a bloke called Sergio Peterson with the help of Leo Hilscher, is to start building. And the first thing I would be doing if I was Queensland Premier is putting 3 power stations or 3 more screws, turbines out at Kogan Creek. There is power station, there is 400 million tonnes of coal there. I would be building the railway line from Wandoan up to Gladstone, because what the state government needs to do is start generating more royalties. Once they build the railway line, they'll also generate more freight charges. And once they start exporting the coal, they'll generate more port charges.
Right.
So that will generate recurring revenue that pays for recurring costs.
Yeah.
And then what you will do is you start building more dams. Dams will increase land value, so you get more land tax. You'll also collect, hopefully, more payroll tax. Not that I want to get rid of payroll tax, by the way. I want to do a deal with states about that to fund the abolition of that. But what you do is, so let's substitute payroll tax for capital gains tax, which is and stamp duty on share trading. Notwithstanding, I want to lower stamp duty back to 1 or 2%. 4% is too high, but you want a 1 or 2% duty just to take speculation out of the market. So that is the way to do it. Good cost management and building and exploiting those assets, that untapped wealth, through your resources and your agricultural land, that basically starts generating recurring revenue. And then from that, you then build a service, a value add industry through manufacturing, and then effectively your service industries. And that's what Joe did. He actually opened up more regional universities, more universities than any other state premier, for example. He got tourism, yet again, our tourism sector has gone to the dogs in Queensland. That is all Labor. Queensland in 1988 after Expo was booming. We got Expo, we had the Commonwealth Games in 1982. We should be, I didn't want the Olympics. I was the only federal MP to say we shouldn't have the Olympics, but now we've got them. We've got to exploit those Olympics to get people coming to Queensland. These should be Queensland Olympics designed at bringing tourism back to Queensland, because that will bring in dollars, that will get lots of people working in small business, and that is the other sector. So we've got to go back to tapping our natural advantages, which is the minerals, our agricultural sector, and the beauty of our great state.
So the question of overall good economic management, I think you've raised a number of excellent points there, Gerard. Campbell, to you, the question of cost of living impact, therefore, and the only way you fix cost of living is to fix the economic situation. How much is cost of living going to play in this poll and how people vote?
Well, I think the cost of living is like an issue that just has people cranky, and stressed, and that's not good for an incumbent government. I agree with what Gerard has said in terms of how you reboot Queensland, if I can call it that. And the thing is that we haven't seen that, for example, from the LNP. The vision that I would have for the state is that, and I'm in the Libertarian Party now, our candidates, and we've got 4 running for seats in southeast Queensland. Our vision is that this state should be the Texas of Australia, and what Gerard has just said is exactly the potential of this state, which is being held back by government and by regulation. The important thing, though, in the campaign is where's that sort of positive story from the LNP, that sort of vision. It's not there. And then the other thing the LNP aren't doing is they're not joining, and no politician really seems to be doing it at the moment. They're not joining the dots for people that high taxes and charges from the state government, while you don't actually see a tax bill yourself on your PAYG tax, they actually do significantly increase your cost of living. So, for example, all this crazy net zero stuff and the rush to renewables has meant that electricity prices have gone up. So on one hand, the price of electricity has gone up, and those, by the way, the electricity supply industry in Queensland is owned by the government, and so they're raping and pillaging you here, but then he gives you, because there's an election on $1,000 over here. It's just completely fraudulent. The price of a cup of coffee, a loaf of bread, is influenced by the land tax on the premises where that retail outlet operates. That's there, and we should be making the case to Queenslanders, listen, bad government that wastes money has to put up taxes and charges far higher than they need to be, and that actually is impacting on your cost of living. I think that's just such a missing element from this sort of discussion these days. And as Gerard was saying, just in the federal sphere, we don't have politicians on the right who are prepared to explain to Australians these issues. They just completely surrender and just allow focus groups and polling to dictate a series of disjointed announcements in an election campaign. It's just
the touchy-feely messages always win. The left have the touchy-feely messages, and the right have to do the job of explaining that there's a connection between tough economic policy sometimes and having the money to do the touchy-feely stuff.
Yeah,
and we do a terrible job, especially with the Greens, I think, of selling that message. Yeah, it's terrible.
Well,
all right,
the Greens right. The Greens right now, by the way, on preferencing, I really should just stick this in again as a political point. I watched with some amusement about 3 or 4 days ago, Stephen Miles trotted out the tired lines about the LNP shouldn't be preferencing One Nation because they're a racist party. Parking whether that's true or not, and I don't believe it is true, but the next thing he then has to be taken to task on by the media is why would the Labor Party do a preference deal with the Greens, who've proved now that they're anti-Semites, they're against Israel, and particularly the scary thing is that they support the state-sponsored terrorism of the Islamic Republic of Iran and their sort of maniacal, brutal rulers. That's what the Greens support. I mean, every time I see a Greens sign during this election, I think terrorist supporter, and we need to get the message across to people that the Greens are the supporters of terrorism and a regime that is completely anathema to Australians and our values. And so it is absolutely impossible, in my view, in all conscience, for the Labor Party to do a preference deal with the Greens. And that's what the media should be pounding Stephen Miles on right now.
Yeah, and once upon a time would have been. It's quite amazing. Yes, the Greens have become the new neo-Nazis and the new radical Islamists and terrorist supporters in a sense with these sorts of, or it seemed to be, with these sorts of policies. All right. Okay. So, gentlemen, just a couple of other quick issues and then we'll wrap up. But the one that wasn't supposed to be on the agenda as far as Christopher was concerned, the question which Labor have very cleverly brought onto the agenda in the past week or so is abortion. Shannon Fentiman, the Labor Health Minister in Queensland, says that the LNP, if they get in, will wind back a woman's right to choose, a woman's right to choose. Christopher has rightly said that that's a scare campaign. I think he's right in that. And Fentiman's come back and said, well, I am actually scared, which is fair enough response. Pretty clever. All but a very few MPs in 2018 from the LNP did vote in favour of Labor's abortion laws, which decriminalised and also extended the term, I think. Is that right? Correct me if I'm wrong, for absolute choice abortion at will, on demand, to about 26 weeks. Which is pretty liberal. Chris Foley himself actually voted against it, which is interesting. Robbie Katter now, the Katter Australia Party, he's come out and said, "I'm your huckleberry to the Conservatives. We'll put a bill forward." How is all of this going to play out without getting into the abortion issue itself, I suppose? But let's just talk about the politics of it and the way it's going to play in the campaign. Your thoughts, Gerard, on that first?
Well, you just come out and say what your policy is. I mean, my understanding of it is the party values is against abortion. But look, if I was David Christodoulou, you'd say you're not an absolutist. You don't believe in abortion up to 9 months. My understanding of it is the law is you can have an abortion right up until 9 months for any reason. And I'm sure there's plenty of people who are happy to draw a line somewhere along the term of that, the life of that period where you go, okay, first term, fair enough, whatever. last 2 terms? No, other than, it could be life-saving. So I'm not going to turn around and say to a woman, for example, something my place to say to a woman who's in a life-threatening position, that's, I'm not going to, do you know what I mean? But if you're in a social thing, you say, well, look, if it wasn't planned or whatever, last 2, you got a term, whatever, other than
There are some
life-threatening,
justifiable,
some sort of thing like that, right? I mean, whatever.
That's
I would
probably the
adopt
position of most Aussies, right? It would be like, okay, a little bit of leeway, but then, okay, you are now dealing with 2 humans after a certain point.
And I think it's important.
But how is this going to play politically? This sort of putting this on the agenda for Chris Afuli?
Well, I'm suspicious. I question why does Robbie Katter done this now? I mean, unless I'm unaware of some sort of gag that was placed on him in the Parliament that's just been dissolved. Why didn't Robbie Katter put it up earlier on? So I'm just sort of scratching my head, going, well, why now? But as to the politics of it right now for Chris Afuli, why couldn't he have answered it, in the way that sort of Gerard was outlining? So I guess I support abortion, but I don't support the murder of babies that are effectively fully developed human beings, and that's where we've got to with the law in Queensland. So I'm with Gerard in that. I think that by all means, there should be the ability for women to have abortions, but the late term abortions, I think Australians need to understand these are viable human beings. These are children that there's very little difference between these children they're aborting and early, preterm sort of babies that are being born that we're desperately trying to save for anxious parents, and that is a big moral issue. So why didn't he have the answer? And he's floundering around all over the shop on it.
That's the problem, right? I mean, it's not, you both have articulated a position. I've articulated a position. There'll be people out there who are watching this show, I know, from my audience, that are going to say, nope, from the moment of conception, that is a human being. There are going to be people who will have the opposite view, who are going to say, nope, it's the absolute right of the woman. But the point is, they'll still vote for you if you come out and show and make a statement. This guy can't even make a statement. He can't put 2 sentences together, so he creates issues. I'm showing my perhaps lack of respect for the current LNP arrangement, but he's not. He can't even just articulate a simple position on an important issue, and therefore it becomes a massive problem, right? It goes on for days and weeks, and this could. I'm just worried that this could really this will work in Labor's favour. I don't know what Katter's objective is. Maybe it's pure, genuine. Approach, but it does seem like this will work in Labor's favour. But that Chris Afuli could again be fixing it overnight and doesn't, because he just doesn't have a position. He doesn't state it clearly, and he's too scared to stand up for anything.
Well, there's that, Damian. But he could go on the front foot and say to people, "Do you know that people, you can have an abortion right up till 9 months for any reason?" I'm not sure that Queenslanders know that.
No, and you could go on the front foot with that, because I think the average Queenslander would be uncomfortable with.
Now it's a question of degree where you want to draw the line.
Of course,
where it gets difficult. But I think most Queenslanders would accept that, as Campbell pointed out, you're basically people can have abortions right up to the last, but the baby's viable. Basically, you could be due one day and decide to, terminate the day before. That's where I think that most people would have a serious issue about. And I'm not convinced most Queenslanders understand that.
Yeah. All right. Well, we will have to leave it there. Campbell's got to run to a meeting. So, Gerard, I'm sure you do too. You've got a busy day in Canberra. We are recording this during the week, and Parliament is sitting at the moment. So I just want to say thank you very much to both of you for your time. And I hope that we can come back sometime in the future and get into some of these other issues, because it was very entertaining to talk about those other things as well. And Gerard,
I'd be looking forward to the whole protectionism versus free marketeer thing. Not that I do believe in markets. I just believe in fair markets, not
absolutely.
The whole, we don't want the big end of town screwing the little guy. That's where we're coming from.
No, you speak a lot of sense, and it's. Well, it's a testament to the state of our politics at the moment that the people who are speaking a lot of sense don't seem to be in the major parties anymore. But
well, you
thanks
get thrown out, basically. I mean, basically, I was gagged within the major party. I mean, I was told, and they poisoned my well. The word was put around that they, couldn't control me when, my view was, well, I'm fighting for our party's values. What have I said that isn't actually in accordance with our party's values?
Well, that's the thing, yeah. I mean, it's one thing to say, we've got to have message discipline. We've all got to be on message together.
Oh,
Yes,
absolutely.
okay. Of course we do, yeah. But if those messages or we've got to have policy discipline, we've got to show unity. But if those policies and things are so off the mark in terms of the values, the core values of the party, as stated, as Campbell says on the website, then, we've got a problem.
Yeah, exactly. Right, mate. Have a good day.
You too. Take care. Thanks
Okay.
again, Gerard. See you.
Cheers. Bye.